The breaking news here in Israel is that there may, in fact, be a deal to get all the hostages out. Hi, this is Joel Rosenberg with All Israel News. Here in Jerusalem, things are moving very rapidly right now, and I want to say first that there is a growing sense of optimism here, cautious optimism, but there is optimism. The headlines here and the news sites are filled with quotes mostly from unnamed Israelis, although Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar also said he was optimistic, talked about how we're getting closer. The latest story seems to be that Hamas is indicating that it's ready to make this deal. I don't want to be overly optimistic, but we need to pray. We need to pray, and I wanted you to be aware of what's happening because remember what the dynamic is. The dynamic here is that we are just days away from Donald Trump becoming the next president of the United States, and not just the president, but the commander-in-chief, right? And what has Donald Trump been saying repeatedly over the last couple months since winning his election in November? He's been saying that if Hamas does not release all the hostages by Monday, January 20th, when he takes the oath of office, quote, there will be all hell to pay, unquote. Now, we all remember that President Ronald Reagan took the oath of office on January 20th, 1981, and as he took the oath of office and became the president, Iran's regime released all the American hostages that have been held for 444 days. Now, Israeli hostages have been held even longer than that. We're well over 460 days. But is it possible that this is all going to come together and happen by Monday, January 20th? There's growing optimism, but there's been optimism before. So I want you to take a look at this interview, an exclusive interview I did with Yechiel Leiter. He's the new Israeli ambassador that's been appointed to go to Washington. He's going in just a few days to be Israel's new ambassador to the United States. And it happened to be that he was on the set of the Rosenberg Report today on TBN, and I was interviewing him on a sort of a profile piece. Who is the new Israeli ambassador to the United States? Most Americans have never heard of him, so I wanted people to know who he is. As we began to sit down to talk, this news started to break. So take a look at some of what he told me. The full interview will be on Thursday night on the Rosenberg Report. But take a look at Ambassador-designate Yechiel Leiter's take on this dynamic with the hostages. Everything is changing, and you are Prime Minister Netanyahu's point man at a moment where, as you and I record this, suddenly we've gone from feeling like almost no chance of a hostage deal to suddenly there's a lot of talk that a deal is about to be done. Now, we want to temper that. Things can go in any direction. But what can you tell us about the Prime Minister's approach and his red lines on making a deal and the impact of President-elect Trump's very forceful and repeated statements there will be hell to pay if Hamas does not release all these hostages by January 20th?
I want to talk about the Prime Minister's attitude towards negotiations with Hamas and what our security concerns are in the context of those negotiations. But I'll start with the last thing you said, Joel, because I think it's perhaps the most important. When President-elect Trump said there's going to be hell to pay if those hostages aren't released, I think it goes to the depth of understanding of what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. The hostages are living in hell. Mm-hmm. And to say that there's going to be hell to pay means that there's recognition that holding people hostage is simply not something that's acceptable. Mm-hmm. This goes back.
It's almost been normalized.
It's almost been normalized. We're negotiating with an organization that grabs people out of their bedrooms, men, women, and children, elderly and the sickly, and holds them in tunnels underground. Let's appreciate this. Some of these tunnels are 40, 50 meters, yards underground. They can
I've taken our audience into those tunnels.
You've seen them. They can barely breathe. Yeah. They're dungeons, really. Yeah. You can't stand up straight. And some of them have been there, most of them who are still there have been there for over a year, well over a year and a quarter. Longer than the amount of time that the American hostages were held in the embassy in Tehran. Right. And the Iranians at the time, Khomeini's regime was afraid of Ronald Reagan entering the White House. And it was that night of the inauguration that the Iranian government released the American hostages just in anticipation of Reagan entering the White House. And I think that there's anticipation now of President Trump entering the White House and the ramifications of holding people, human beings, in hell. I mean, this is a concept in the Ten Commandments that's discussed. Not to steal includes not stealing people.
Look, nobody knows right now exactly what's going to happen, but I can tell you that I have not seen this level of optimism and a sense that this may actually happen since November 2023, when the only other hostage deal was done. Now, there's tremendous pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu by the Israeli people, of course, to get all the hostages out. But there's also tremendous pressure on Netanyahu by Hamas. We'll give you your hostages, but we want you to surrender in Gaza. If those are the terms of the deal, you're going to see a lot of people in the Israeli cabinet say, I can't do that. You probably will see Netanyahu himself say, I can't do that. But does Netanyahu want a deal that gets all the hostages out? Absolutely. Is he going to sacrifice all the gains Israel's made against Hamas in Gaza for it? I don't think so. And interesting, as you learn more on the Rosenberg report and on All Israel News later, Yechiel Leiter, the new ambassador that's heading over to Israel, Washington in just a few days. In fact, I'll be having dinner with him in just a few days over there. But his son, his oldest son, he's a father of 8, was killed. He was the head of a special forces unit fighting in Gaza and was murdered, killed, he fell in battle, Moshe Leiter, fighting Hamas in Gaza. So Leiter has a real personal stake in this. He wants to see all those hostages out. He also wants Israel's sacrifices not to be in vain and not to just surrender in Gaza. Netanyahu's been taking a lot of political heat for this because everyone's pushing him. Bibi, how come you're not making a deal? How come you're not making a deal? As though Netanyahu doesn't want all of our hostages back. I think that's an unfair attack against him. I understand the pain that many Israelis, especially hostage families, have. They want their sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers back, husbands and wives back at all costs. Netanyahu has to think, however, of the larger picture. Make a deal, but you can't surrender and let Hamas win the way President Joe Biden essentially surrendered in Afghanistan. After 20 years of the United States fighting terrorism in Afghanistan, Biden pulled out just days, weeks before the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and the democratic elected government of Afghanistan fell, and the Taliban terror group took over, and it was a huge shame and humiliation of the American people and all the sacrifices all those soldiers and airmen and Marines had made to liberate Afghanistan and to end that terror threat once and for all. So while the dynamic's not the same, the principle is the same. If you're going to fight and you're going to ask young men and women to lay down their lives to fight against terror and to crush terror, you can't surrender when you're so close to the end zone. So please keep praying. We'll keep you posted on every detail, every step of the way, right here on All Israel News.